Who is building an arch to honor himself? And who's got banners of his big, ugly face hanging all over downtown D.C.? Now, that's what I would call a vandal. And so Donald Trump is the Vandal-in-Chief, Grift Force One, this flying bribe that has come here from Qatar. While Americans can't afford gas, can't afford food, are getting kicked off healthcare to go, it's the most luxurious plane in the world. Everybody knows that the deal he struck with Qatar, when he leaves the presidency, the plane goes with him. He gets to keep it. It's beyond Grift. This is corruption at a scale that we have never seen it, and he's bragging about it.
I'm Joanna Coles. This is the Daily Beast podcast. It's Monday, so we must be with David Rothkopf, and indeed we are, where we're going to talk about a lonely figure on the international stage, JD Vance, as his boss tries to undermine him on Truth Social. We're going to talk about why did the Trump organization single out Eric Trump for love on Father's Day and forget about his other children? Who knows why? And we're going to talk about the drama unfolding as we have this conversation in the UK as the British Prime Minister resigns. It's all action. And don't forget, Grift Force One, the new plane from Qatar that David has very strong opinions about. So let's get into it. David Rothkopf.
Joanna Coles, where are you today?
I am still in the south of France, my friend. I'm not going to complain. We have record temperatures, record amounts of rosé in bottles flowing everywhere, champagne everywhere. And everybody is very excited about the transformation in the advertising business. That's why I'm here to hustle up dollars, which reminds me that we would love you to subscribe to the Daily Beast. If you haven't, this is your moment to show your support for independent media, and they don't come much more independent than David Rothkopf.
Yeah, show your support for independent media and help pay for Joanna's return flight from Cannes.
Thank
If you don't
yes,
subscribe,
my return
people
flight.
do not subscribe, she's not coming back.
I'm going to get stuck there. Well, that will encourage people to not subscribe, David. So listen, we've got, I know it was Father's Day in the US yesterday. We have to talk about the diss to Don Jr., who didn't appear in his father's Truth Social rantings, but Eric Trump did. So lots of love for Eric Trump from the Trump organization, but no love for Don Jr. We must talk about a lonely day for JD Vance. I'm sure he would rather have been at home with his 3 children, but instead he was in Switzerland yodeling for peace with the Omanis and the Pakistanis. And I'm dying to talk about the accusations of vandalism at the long reflecting pool that Trump says has been slashed as if it were the Friday the 13th movie and Freddy Krueger appearing at night. And instead, it turns out a former Olympian has been arrested for pinching a bit of floating paint. So where do we begin? We've got Grift Force One, as Hugh calls it, the new airplane from Qatar. And last time we talked, we mentioned the UFC because that had happened the day before. We've also had the Obama Library, which it's just the juxtaposition of UFC fighting, the reflecting pool reflecting nothing, the ballroom in a demolition crisis, and then all the other ex-presidents like a sort of band back together in Chicago. But I guess we should start with the Iran deal and what's happening. And poor JD Vance, as I said, yodeling peace.
Poor JD Vance. We all feel terrible for JD.
I'm sure he's eating a lot of Toblerone. I hope he is, and cheese and clocks. I mean, what else is Switzerland for?
There's something else Switzerland is for, and that is to dispose of vice presidents you don't like very much. And this is, what Donald Trump is doing. It's like, here's this thing that Donald Trump has not been able to solve. that is really impossible to solve on the terms that Donald Trump wants to solve it. And somebody's got to be the fall guy. And he's like, who could I pick from around here? And he goes, well, maybe it's that guy, JD Vance, or whatever the name he's using these days is. Let's send him over there. And then when we have to strike a lousy deal, we'll say, well, that was JD.
Don't you remember when the Maduro extraction happened that Trump was everywhere talking about it? He was everywhere. And of course, he's pushed JD Vance out to negotiate this impossible peace deal that the Iranians are just frankly laughing at. And then he's undermining JD Vance's attempts by his Truth Social posts. Please explain.
Well, yeah, and also we seem to be hearing in all sorts of stories and upcoming books and all kinds of other nonsense that he talks shit about JD Vance behind his back, and he's always going up to people going, "Who do you like better, JD or Marco?" And he's kind of playing them off of each other like his kids, right? Like he did this weekend with Eric and Don Jr. But, you talk about something else that's pure Trump, which is he's first in line to take credit for things he thinks he can get credit for. And he is the first to push it away. And I would expect any minute Don Jr. to be named the head of the committee to fix the reflecting pool. Because, why not give that thankless job to him, since, of course, we know the reason for the problems with the reflecting pool. But with Iran, the problem is this. Every single available solution is less good than where we were the day before the war started, and less good than where we were the day before the Obama agreement was torn up by Trump. And so he's going to get an agreement on nukes that's less good than the Obama agreement. And we saw this already because JD came out and said, look, we have an agreement and they're going to allow inspectors in. And that's fantastic. And, people need to stop and, just sort of go back and look at their notes, because that was in the Obama agreement. Iran's promise not to have nuclear weapons was in the Obama agreement and in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and all the way back to 1957. They kept saying that. So he is achieving nothing. Trump knows he will achieve nothing because Trump has a secret that he actually knows in some part of his lizard brain. And that is, he has no cards. All the cards he says he has, I have all the cards. He has no cards. And he rolled out the Republican Party over the weekend. Lindsey Graham, bunch of other sort of spear carriers in the Republican Party all come out and go, if we don't have a deal, then we are going to go out and we're going to bomb them. And of course, the Iranians know something that Lindsey Graham doesn't know, which is there's no way Donald Trump's going to go back to war. There's no way Donald Trump is going to go and try and take over the Strait of Hormuz. This war is despised by 70% of the American people. It's going to cause economic hardship for everybody through the elections, no matter what they do. And so, Trump's stuck. He knows whoever negotiates the deal is going to end up with egg on his face. And so he goes, how about the guy with the beard?
How about the guy who's trying to promote his book, Communion, Finding My Way Back to Faith?
Yeah, what a guy. What a guy. This weekend, he was meeting with a Pakistani, and he said, the most important people in my life are an Indian and a Pakistani, my wife and you. They're the only ones I talk to, even though his wife is, of course, from Southern California. But
right, his wife is American. Her parents are Indian.
Well, exactly. But he is the smarmiest guy in the world. And today, when somebody said, well, the Iranians don't like it when Trump threatens them, Vance said, well, we told them, this is what we call in America trash talk. And if they talk trash about him, he's going to talk trash about them. And, he was trying to kiss ass and defend him, and he sounded like a dork. And of course, the interesting thing about all this is that the very beginning of the MOU specifically says that neither side will threaten the other side.
Right. And what does Donald Trump do? He can't stop himself, David. He cannot stop himself.
Well, that's right, because he's never made an agreement that he hasn't broken. And that's where we are here. And so, what happened last night, right before markets open, they said, okay, but maybe we're making some progress, because they don't want, the thing they fear is not the Iranians, it's the stock market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe they fear the Iranians a little bit too.
Well, I mean, they fear the Iranians are going to push harder and harder, because the Iranians are really good at that. And the Iranians know that, there's nothing that Trump can say no to that they can't overrule. And we saw that, because Trump said there will be no tolls. And then the Iranians go, well, there's going to be an administrative fee, and we're going to go ahead and do this anyway. And Trump's like, yeah, well, maybe there needs to be an administrative fee. And the Iranians said, Trump's like, we're going to get rid of missiles. And the Iranians said, no, we need missiles. And so then Trump comes out and goes, well, we can't take away their missiles, can we? And so forth. And they're going to hold his feet to the fire. And he's going to realize, I think if we stop and we look at Donald Trump's benighted life, at his 5 or 6 bankruptcies and his 3 failed marriages and the kids who hate him and the business partners who don't want to do business with him anymore, and all the stupid, fucked up things Donald Trump has done in his life, this is one of the worst. This is going to be one of his signature failures as president, because this war, it is, in a Wall Street bank on Friday estimated that the total cost to the planet of this war could be $1 trillion to the global economy. And the war itself probably they estimate has cost $130 billion minimally. And, there is no level on which him starting this war is working out for him.
Well, nothing about his treatment of Iran has made sense, right? The minute he ripped up the JCPOA, the Obama agreement, the Iranians immediately started enriching uranium again. They immediately embarked on the nuclear program, requiring the obliteration, in theory, obliteration last summer. And now we're in a worse position. I do not understand why more people aren't outraged by this. I don't understand why more European leaders aren't outraged by it. I mean, Giorgia Meloni gets outraged because he's put out nonsense about wanting her begging for a selfie. And she's like, Italians, we don't beg, we never beg.
I love that.
Why aren't they more outraged by what has gone on here?
Because I think that the European leaders, for the most part, are rational human beings who realize that getting outraged is not going to get them anything. And their whole plan, and I've talked to some European diplomats about this, I think their plan is ride it out, manage Trump. They've got the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, the former Prime Minister of Holland, and he kisses Trump's ass a little bit. And some of the others stroke him, and Macron is one day tough on him and one day nice. And Keir Starmer, the outgoing Prime Minister of the UK, one day tough on him and one day nice. And Giorgia Meloni, when she yells at him, she says, but I could have been your ally. I support some of the things that you support. And I think they're just trying to get to the end of this nightmare, because they know that if he gets pissed off, then he starts tariffs. We're going to have tariffs. We're going to have bad trade deals. I'm pulling my troops out. I'm not, and they don't want to have to go through that. So I think they're just being sensible. As for Americans being outraged, Joanna, the poll this weekend said 70% of the American people don't approve of this. That's as outraged as America gets, because 30% of America thinks the earth is flat.
Right. So the rest of us think that the war in Iran was a bad idea. So, David, on top of the reflecting pool, can we just have a moment on the reflecting pool? Because it's supposed to be ready by July the 4th. It appears that the whole thing is going to have to be redone. We know the contract didn't go out to tender. It went to a friend of Donald Trump's. Are we surprised that the reflecting pool is reflecting nothing but the corruption and the greed and the, frankly, grift of this current administration?
First of all, that's a rhetorical question because clearly we're not surprised, right? But secondly, let's just break this down a little bit. Did you see the picture of the guy who got the contract?
Of course I saw him. He looks like a mafia don. He looks like a mafia don. I mean, when Hugh Doherty, our executive editor, got that picture, he was beside himself. I mean, the hair, the moustache, the overcoat.
He doesn't look like a mafia don. He looks like a kid in high school playing a mafia don in the high school production of The Sopranos.
Okay, fair, fair.
He's like holding a big cigar and he's got this cheesy coat on. But the reality is this. Trump screws up things all the time. Trump is the tackiest person on earth. But this was a really big, let's look at this. The reflecting pool was fun, right? And he thought it was a little dirty. And so he said, well, okay, let's refinish the bottom of the reflecting pool. It wasn't that tough. It didn't take that many days. And yet, from every single possible perspective, it's been a debacle. They did it with the wrong people. They did it in an illegal way. They painted the bottom of it the wrong color. The bottom color heated it up. When it heated it up, algae started to grow. There was a picture over the weekend of a dead duck floating around in the algae in this pool.
It was so sad. Sad.
It was horrible. And it's turned into a tourist attraction in downtown DC for people to hate on Trump, right? They come down and they reflect on what a bad president they've got. So then Trump sends in the National Guard and people from Homeland Security to threaten people. And then he's like, holy mackerel, this is a mess. What are we going to do? And he's like, well, I have to blame it on somebody. So he comes up with a conspiracy theory and he says, well, it was vandals and they cut, according to him, a 250-foot gash in the bottom of the materials on the bottom of the pool. And he says, we're rounding up these vandals who are behind this whole thing. Lord knows that, if there were a vandal, and we'll get to that in a second, they would not get the pardon that the vandals who destroyed the Capitol on January 6th got. But of course, there is beyond all of this, there is this meta thing. And the meta thing is, who's the vandal in Washington? Who's defacing everything in Washington? Who defaced the Oval Office? Who destroyed the East Wing? Who put a giant claw on the South Lawn of the White House? Who is building a gilded ballroom for billionaires to dance in while Americans starve? Who is building an arch to honor himself? Who's covering all the horse statues in Washington in gold leaf? Somebody, and who's got banners of his big, ugly face hanging all over downtown DC? Now, that's what I would call a vandal. And so Donald Trump is the Vandal-in-Chief. He is the man who is defacing the nation's capital. And, he's trying to go further. He wants to rename Penn Station after himself. He's trying to rename Dulles Airport after himself. He's renamed West Palm Beach Airport after himself. He didn't do enough damage as the worst, most tasteless developer in America. Now, he's taken it to another scale with TAC. And by the way, it ties to something else you've talked about, which is Grift Force One, this flying bribe that has come here from Qatar, that he decides, this is like mind-boggling. The president holds a press conference to say, look at the $400 million gift I was given by a foreign government. And to then, while Americans can't afford gas, can't afford food, are getting kicked off healthcare, go, it's the most luxurious plane in the world. And he's got it painted in these cheesy Trump colors. And everybody knows that the deal he struck with Qatar was not just they give him a plane to use as president, but the deal is that when he leaves the presidency, the plane goes with him. He gets to keep it. I mean, and it cost $1 billion to upgrade the plane to be suitable to be Air Force One. So he gets $400 million from the Qataris, he gets $1 billion from the taxpayers, and he gets to keep the plane. I mean, this is grift, but it's beyond grift. This is corruption at a scale that we have never seen it, and he's bragging about it. I mean, something's missing.
I'm very glad I checked in with you this morning because we're receiving peak Rothkopf this morning. Your outrage is very clear. Do you think the reflecting pool will be done by July the 4th? Is that even possible? And is it possible there was his description of the dagger and the 250-foot slash? I thought they'd just painted the bottom of the pool, so it's not possible to have slashed it. Is it just all made up?
Well, of course it's all made up.
Right.
I mean, Joanna, there are cameras all around the pool. There's cameras all around Washington. If somebody did that, it would be on video. No, nobody did that. And what he says, a slash, is what he meant was that the kind of surface, what they paint it with, is a kind of a rubberized surface. It's and what's happening is they didn't affix it to the concrete or whatever the reflecting pool is made out of properly, and so pieces of it are just floating up in the swamp. Now, for meme makers everywhere, it's been great, because here is the drain the swamp guy literally building a swamp in the middle of Washington.
Right. That's it's an amazing metaphor, isn't it?
It is amazing. Happening. And so there's thousands of little internet memes of, Trump covered with algae and, the seaweed hanging from his face, like the Thing or some horror movie monster crawling out of this swamp. And in fact, one of the great things that happened over the weekend is that some creative artists started projecting on different buildings in Washington images from the Swamp Thing coming up, and they just started projecting all over Washington, mocking images of Trump. So I think that one of the things about the reflecting pool is the timing couldn't be worse, because you had this Iran war debacle. The country's in a mess. The 250th birthday is coming up. You had this UFC hideousness, and now there's this thing, and it's such a symbol of his vandalism, his failure, his inability to take responsibility for anything, his turning Washington into the grimiest, slimiest swamp of all time. You talk about reflection, upon reflection, this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor for Trump, and it's pretty powerful.
And what do you think the most serious of his cabinet members think as they drive past it in their government cars? Do they have their head in their hands? Well, okay. Totally fair question. But if you were thinking of, for example, Marco Rubio, who at least had a career as a senator before, or if you thought of Scott Bessent driving past, these are people that you still think have a foot in reality. Do you think they're just head in hands thinking, oh my goodness, we can't even get this done?
You're doing this to trigger me.
Okay. There's no foot in reality. You don't think there's any foot left in reality?
Or no, maybe it's in the Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan book. But apparently, Scott Bessent referred to Zelensky as Mr. Bean in a bad suit. I mean, how dare he? This pampered parody of a rich guy, with practically going around with a monocle and a top hat, make fun of this guy who is an actual hero of democracy, who stood up to Russia for 4 years, and he's comparing him to Mr. Bean. I mean, Marco Rubio is kicking people out of the country or keeping them out of the country for offering views on the internet that are critical of Trump. Marco Rubio is like, I'm Mr. Normie, right? But he has gone 100% total fascist. He's responsible for the millions of people who are going to die because USAID was shut down. He has gutted the State Department. There are most diplomatic posts, senior diplomatic posts in the U.S. has around the world are open because he doesn't think he needs them. He's presided over the shutdown of the NSC, and he's presided over the worst U.S. foreign policy ever. Look at the tariffs. Look at the invasion of Venezuela. Look at sinking all of these boats around the world, blowing up NATO, blowing up our allies, kissing up to autocrats from around the world, the president's grift, destroying American soft power. That's the normal guy?
Fair point. I totally triggered you. But do you think there's nobody riding up and down in their hushed, quiet government cars that doesn't look out and think, how can we have messed up the reflecting pool? It's such a peaceful place in Washington. It's supposed to be a peaceful place. It's a sort of sacred place for reflecting.
Maybe Melania, when she's escaping the White House and she's heading off to whatever actual home she lives in and whatever actual bed she sleeps in, might go, that idiot has done it again. But you could do that in her voice better than I could.
Or he is unifying Washington with what has happened to reflect pool. The pool reflect, if it's not reflecting. That's a weird accent. I'm thrown because I'm in the south of France and I've been speaking French all morning, so now I'm very confused. I don't know where I am or what's happening.
You did see that the final accounting on the Melania movie is coming out. And
tell me exactly what it is.
Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know that it was something like, it made a few $1 million in revenue, but it cost them 40 to make, and then another 60
35,
or 80 or something to
promote,
to market and stuff. So they may have spent $100 million on this movie. They probably lost 70 or $80 million on the movie. It was a complete flop. But anyway, I don't know who it is. Clearly somebody must realize what a mess he is making of these things. I mean, in the Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan book, apparently somebody says they go into the Oval Office and Trump is like there putting up this gold filigree stuff in the Oval
super
Office.
Glue, right? With super glue.
With super glue. Now, we could talk about Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan and what an absolute offense to journalism it is for them to go and collect all this stuff and then keep it until it's a book, right? I mean, there's some of the things that they're writing about here, which include, his, failings as president, bad policy, and all this other stuff. That is news. And they just hold on to it until they can go and cash in on it as a book.
What offends you the most? What are the points that you feel they should have released at the time?
There are so many. I am offended by people who are day-to-day journalists who are not reporting breaking news when it comes in. I mean, Donald Trump, it was very clear to him that, people thought that he was not healthy, that people thought that, that there was fighting in the White House and there were tensions between different people in the White House. The White House was dysfunctional in many respects. And they just thought, no, we're going to keep this until we release the book. And, they're good journalists. They write good stuff. But something has happened in journalism today where it's perfectly acceptable to go and gather up all this stuff and not report it until you get paid, until your payday happens, until it gets you on the New York Times bestseller list. And I just think that's an offense to journalism.
But hasn't that always been the way? Hasn't that been the way with Bob Woodward?
Yeah, he's one of the worst offenders. In fact, Bob Woodward probably owns the patent on this kind of offense to journalism.
Well, it's the conflict or the tension, isn't it, between the writer and the journalist and the nobody's going to buy a book if there's nothing new in it when you're writing this kind of nonfiction. So it's complicated. And I guess the Times thinks that they want to keep them reporting. And so this is the quid pro quo.
But no, I guess so. But, it is also possible to wait a couple of years, have some perspective. But one of the problems is that publishers want books on breaking news now. So, they want them to write 3 books in the course of the presidency in real time that break news. And I think that's where you get the tension. Used to be in the olden days, somebody would write a book, it would come out 3 years after, it would be about perspective, which, by the way, we could use some perspective, right? I think that's not a bad thing to focus on. But it's an ugly model, and frankly, it doesn't do the American people any service. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I'm very curious to read the book. Have you ordered yours?
Somebody offered to send me a copy, so I will read the free copy I get.
Okay, so I do want to talk about Donald Trump as a father. And on Father's Day, the Trump Organization marks it with a gushing, as gushing as the water from the reflecting pool tribute to Eric Trump, with no mention whatsoever of Donald Jr. Now, it says, this Father's Day, we celebrate not just the man who inspired it all, but the son who showed up every single day and proved that the greatest gift a father can give isn't a name or a fortune, it's an example. The empire that Donald J. Trump built did not survive 4 years of presidential service by accident. It survived because a son put on his hard hat and went to work. Eric Trump is not merely the beneficiary of his father's legacy, he is its keeper, its engine, and its next great chapter. What can this mean for Don Jr., whose wedding to socialite Bettina Anderson, whose father was a financial advisor to Jeffrey Epstein, what can this mean for Don Jr.?
Nothing good. I mean, clearly, Don Jr. is not in his father's good graces. I mean, he could have gone to the wedding. Clearly, Bettina really wanted the wedding at the White House. They could have done it there. It wouldn't have cost Don anything. He probably wouldn't have even, spent any time with them there. He doesn't spend much time with anybody. In fact, is it in the Maggie Haberman book that he goes into his separate bedrooms with Melania, and then his bedroom ends up being all littered with fast food?
And ice cream cartons, ice cream cartons.
And she doesn't want to live with that. So he goes in there and then they have to go in and clean it up every day. Anyway,
I don't think that's the reason that Melania doesn't want to hang out with Donald.
Well, I don't know.
That he's got empty ice cream cartons and wrappers of hamburger wrappers at the bottom of the bed. I think there are probably other reasons she doesn't want to live with them.
You're absolutely right. But Joanna, think about this guy. He's like the president, or he's the super rich billionaire. And he's alone. His wife doesn't want to be anywhere near him. In his bedroom, spending countless hours, texting and tweeting in his jammies. And he's eating a Big Mac and he throws the carton on the floor and he's eating. I mean, it's like Howard Hughes or something. I mean, it's one of these billionaires who's lost his mind, except he's the fucking president of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the amazing thing. And his family, I mean, it's not just Don Jr. What about Melania's favorite child? I mean, you just look at Barron and you go, this guy, there are bad headlines in store for this dude. Not to make, he hangs out with Andrew Tate and he loves, that whole world. But he's not mentioned. Tiffany, she's never, poor Tiffany, she's never mentioned. I mean, I think he's still deeply in love with Ivanka.
But Ivanka's taken herself out of the running, right? She's just said, politics is too cruel. I don't want anything to do with it. So Jared is busy out there negotiating, but Ivanka's not part of it.
Well, right. She's not part of it. She's like, Jared, you take the heat. You be out there. I'm be telling you what to do from behind the scenes.
Well, and happily she's found the Albanian island that they want to
They're
live on.
And Albania is closer to a revolution over the corruption of the Trumps than we are. And they could get. I mean, I love what's going on in Albania. I think there's a lot we can learn from them.
Yeah, we should remind people. People have literally been. I mean, thousands of people have been protesting in the streets over Ivanka and Jared's hope. Well, in fact, it seems like they've already started work in this natural, beautiful beach and part of Cezanne Island, which Ivanka said that she discovered when she was staying on a friend's yacht, and she went swimming, and then they found this island, and then they climbed to the top of the island, and they were barefoot, and it was so intrepid. And then they discovered that they could buy this island for not very much money and turn it into a fabulous billionaire's resort. And she said it was just the kind of place she'd always wanted to live.
They don't live on the same planet as we do. I think Ivanka is living in this billionaire's bubble where she believes she can arrange her world in such a way that she can influence her father and have her husband be the front guy who takes all the heat for these things. And he can go and collect money from overseas governments that want to, have a special in with the president. And she can look like she's removed from it and she's just being a mom. But then, she travels around the world on yachts and things, and she says, oh, that island looks nice. Let's take that one. And she just is completely out of touch with the idea that, it might belong to somebody else, or, that might not have a price, or the country involved might want to have a say in what happens to it. And it's this kind of, there is this, there's this group, there are 1,100 billionaires in the United States that live in a life on a different planet from the rest of us. And she is, she's just sort of got it down. And she thinks she can escape on the other end of the Trump presidency and is not going to bear the burden of the fact that her father is an accused sex offender, an accused fraudster, has been impeached a couple of times, maybe impeached another couple more times, is the worst president in history. She's going to think, no, I can escape all that. That's her whole game. And it's Melania's game too. It's kind of interesting that these people are like trying to get close to Trump, trying to get as much cash out of him as they can, but trying to not be tainted by the fact that they're associated.
I just want to go back to Eric Trump, because this tribute, it's more than 1,000 words long on the Trump Organization. And it says, from an early age, he was on the job sites. He mowed lawns. He laid tiles. But what distinguishes Eric from the caricature that critics attempt to construct is the texture of the man himself. He is, by all accounts, someone who genuinely loves the work, the construction, the design, the tangible satisfaction of standing in front of something he helped build. He has spoken often about his deep love for the outdoors, for skiing, for shooting. He is, in a word, real. I mean, what is this? It's just super bizarre. And then it says Eric Trump growing up alongside the greatest deal maker in America and what it means to carry that legacy forward. What can it mean to carry that legacy forward?
I don't know. I think they're all going to have to change their names. It's like the Hitler family that used to live in Long Island.
Right.
And after World War II, they changed their names. You don't want to. You don't want to have to carry that burden. And by the time Trump is done, a couple more impeachments, a couple more giant scandals, once we learn what's really going on in the Epstein files, once, that there are 15 more scandals that we're going to hear about. By the time we get to the end of this thing, he's going to be Eric Smith. He's going to be Eric Smith of the
He's going to be living in an FBI protection program.
Right. And it's going to be the worldwide big building corporation, and it's not going to have any name associated with it. But the funny thing is, you read all of that. When I think of Don and Eric, I think of Beavis and Butthead. And I'm like, that's the image I see. Eric was always the dope. He was always the one that everybody was making fun of. Maybe Don feels sorry for him in some respect. I don't know. It is clearly a very dysfunctional family. I was thinking about this today, and I know other people have made this comment about Trump. Have you ever seen him show affection for anybody?
Well, apart from grabbing his wife's arm or hand because she's always flicking it away.
Right. She pulls it back. But have you ever seen him do, I was watching the Obama thing. And here's Obama and Michelle and their kids, and Obama and Bush and Obama and Clinton and so forth, Obama and Joe Biden. There's real affection. These people care about each other. They're normal. They're not that normal. They want to be president. You're not normal if you want to be president, right? But they have some normal traits that they have not completely lost. And, Michelle came out wearing a skirt that had her mother's face on it, and he got all moved. And, I'm not into this, I think Barack Obama was a pretty good president. I think he's a good guy and a very smart guy, and he's a great orator, and he made history, and he deserves a lot of credit. But I think he was a kind of a pretty good president. But watching these people at the Obama library and thinking they're normal. George Bush and Laura Bush, they like the Obamas. They're nice to each other. George Bush gives Michelle Obama in a funeral a mint. You think Donald Trump ever gave anybody a fucking mint in his life? That he ever said, "Oh, you look like you need a mint"? He did that. That's it. There's no normal there.
Well, there's no normal in the UK right now, David, because Keir Starmer has just resigned after a mere 2 years in the job as British Prime Minister. I mean,
depends on what you mean by normal.
Well, Britain's turning into Italy.
Yeah, you've had 7 prime ministers in a decade, right?
Yeah, which is very unusual for Britain. And also, Keir Starmer is the man who shaped the Labour Party up, so it could be re-elected after endless years of Tory rule. I think 14 years of Tory rule. So remarkable exit for him, as he's threatened by a Mamdani type figure who's been the mayor of Greater Manchester.
Well, let's break that down. Okay, first of all, Keir Starmer, prior to being prime minister, was a pretty respected guy.
Mm-hmm. He was the chief prosecutor.
Right. He was kind of similar to the Colin Firth character in the Bridget Jones movies. That was kind of how he was viewed, right? And he just didn't have. And again, this is a leadership thing. You know about it from business, but some people just don't want to take the hard decisions. Some people are just not made for being the front guy in this way, and he just couldn't deliver. And it was pathetic. But there were 6 other pathetic leaders of the UK in the course of the past decade as well. When you say a Mamdani-like figure, what do we mean?
Well, we mean someone who's leaning into progressive politics as a way of making people feel better, I think. I mean, and just to, I'm going to stop you on the Keir Starmer thing, because the first decision Keir Starmer's government did was to cut the benefits for pensioners' heating. I've never come across a worse political decision than to cut old people's heating benefits. It was a staggering decision. Then they went after the farmers. They've made decision after decision that was incomprehensible to people, actually. I don't think it's just that he's not a front man. He's not a great orator. As Donald Trump said recently, he's not Winston Churchill. You don't have to be Winston Churchill, but he's definitely not a politician, is what it turns out.
Yeah, even Winston Churchill wasn't Winston Churchill, right? Remember, for 4 years he was Winston Churchill.
Yeah, during the war. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And he made some bad decisions, and he undermined himself politically as a result of them. And clearly, he made those decisions because he was making a behind-the-scenes political calculus with pressure from different people within his party, and it was the wrong way to go. But I'm thinking about the Mamdani thing from a slightly different perspective, because when I read about these developments, and you see people like Andy Burnham being compared to Mamdani, or Washington has just finished its mayoral primary, and the person who will be the next mayor of Washington is another Democratic socialist, just like there is in New York, just like there is in Seattle. Or people compare AOC and Bernie Sanders and so forth, and they say they're leftists. I was reading The Economist, and they refer to them as leftists, and that this is about their being progressive. And I don't think that's what Mamdani's about. And I don't think that's what this change is about. Mamdani is about lower rent, cheaper buses for traveling, pre-K for people who need it, a grocery in your neighborhood. These people recognize that the people don't believe government serves them, that people believe government serves powerful people above the government, and it's not delivering the kind of basic needs they've got. And I see this as kind of a different thing. It's about good governance and nuts and bolts, meeting the needs of average people who feel like they're being left out by governments that are controlled by oligarchs. And so it's not, I don't think the labels are super helpful. And clearly Mamdani has been thus far very successful by delivering small scale but meaningful positive. He filled 100,000 potholes. That wasn't nothing. That was something. And I think that's, frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more of a focus on mayors. Mayors actually have to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're accountable, aren't they? Mamdani hasn't been able to deliver free buses, and he hasn't been able to tax the rich quite as vehemently as he said he was going to, because there are all sorts of...
But it's June, and he's been in office for 6 months, and he did come up with a tax for pied-à-terres, and he did it with the governor and the legislature, and he did get something done. And he's checking. I'm not. This is not a Mamdani campaign speech.
Well, it sounds a little bit like one. And as someone who lives in New York City, which I know you live in the beautiful part of DC that you do, as someone who lives in New York City, I will say I haven't noticed any difference whatsoever to the number of mentally ill people that are on the streets. He's been incredibly lucky in terms of the overall decline in crime in cities. And he's been unbelievably lucky with the Knicks win, which has put everybody in a fantastically good mood.
Well, look.
And lucky is better than smart many times, right?
Luck helps. And the reality is this, that in New York, when he came in, and now, there are 120,000 people without homes. Which is, vastly more than any other city in the United States. It is a serious problem. Will he solve it? Will he make a big dent? I don't know. I actually am getting at something else. I'm a little tired of the labels, of people saying, oh, Trump and the conservatives. There's nothing conservative about Trump. Or, the left is got to be destroyed in order for the centrists to win. But the centrists are really people who are advancing a corporate agenda, and they're not so much center. They're sort of pulling things to the right. And what do you mean by the left? Are you talking about health care for everybody in this country? Well, everybody wants that, or common sense gun controls or stuff. That's not what the issues are anymore. I just think the labels aren't super useful. And I think people are really sick of government that seems to be giving breaks to rich people and powerful people, and doesn't seem to be helping them with their very real problems of whether they're paying for their lives, or whether it's a crazy guy in the street, or whether it's crime or whatever. And I just think they want government that works. And, the thing about Trump is, I did this over the weekend. I thought I would turn it into a column. And I sat down and I made a list of 50 initiatives. You always tell me I'm making lists all the time. Probably some manifestation of OCD. But I made a list of 50, what I thought were sort of the 50 major Trump initiatives. And every single one of them was bad. and every single one of them had a bad outcome. And I went out on the internet and I said, please name for me one thing Trump has done since becoming president that was actually meaningfully good for most Americans. And the answer was none. Now, I know I'm on blue sky and I'm a liberal crazy and whatever, but the reality is that Trump is an example of bad governance. We're living at a nadir. The British government is not functioning. Somehow our governments are not actually meeting the needs of people to deal with their day-to-day issues, whether it's the cost of living or getting health care or being made safe or just having decent infrastructure around them. And I just think that we're at a kind of watershed, particularly in the US, where the majority of the under 40 population, which is the majority of the electorate going forward, they don't believe. There was just a poll. 70% of them don't believe in the American dream anymore. They don't believe they're going to ever own a home. And I just think everywhere this is the issue. The issue is, could somebody make my life a little better? Can they make a plausible case they can make my life a little better?
Right. Can gas get cheaper? Can I buy a home? For the most part, sort of modest ambitions, which, and also in the light of Elon Musk becoming the world's first trillionaire.
In light of the Elon Musk being the world's worst trillionaire, I saw somebody on the internet this morning saying, if you have $1, you are closer in wealth to the second wealthiest person in the world than the second wealthiest person is to Elon Musk.
Wow. That's a fun riddle.
The point is Elon Musk is one of the worst people in the world. He's a racist. He's got a platform for racists. He's taken companies that other people have created. He's been a huckster. He sold the stock. And he's fucked up the companies. I mean, Tesla will not be a major factor in electric vehicles in 5 years because it's been overtaken by the Chinese. X, he destroyed. SpaceX is a con of the first order. Everything about SpaceX is based on, well, if we go to Mars, this company will be worth a lot. Or if its rockets don't blow up, this company will be worth a lot. Or if data centers are based in outer space, this company will be worth a lot. And it's all on the come. It's all make-believe. But he has figured out a way to do that and to make $1 trillion by doing that, even though everything he touches turned to crap. Look at Doge. Everything Doge did, some of it was illegal, some of it turned to crap. What they did with USAID will result in 10 million people dying. The cuts they're making in terms of cancer research, or the cuts they made in terms of, other forms of like veterans services and so forth. People are dying and suffering from that right now, and yet investors are like, yeah, let me write him another check. And it's not because they think he'll create value. It's because they think there will be demand for what he's selling, and that they can get out of the stock before all the suckers who are holding on to it once it collapses in the future. And
well, David Rothkopf, there's demand for what you're selling, which is outrage and humorous lists full of contempt for our current government.
It's not contempt. I just wish it worked better. I just wish it worked a little better. I just wish people's needs were taken care of a little more effectively. And, that's why some of that Obama thing was pretty moving, because there were people there who'd worked and they were all deeply flawed people. But Joe Biden and Barack Obama and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, all of whom made huge mistakes, they all did something positive. And we look back on that. They were a little bit decent. They were a little bit effective. And we look back on that now with yearning. because we are in such a black hole of malevolent, bad governance.
I do think that watching the old presidents get the band back together, as it were, in Chicago, also reminded you of presidents who, when they were doing the job, believed that they were representing all of America, that was their goal and that was their wish. And you didn't see the divisiveness that you see with our current leadership.
There's a fundamental difference between them. And it's really important to remember because July 4th is just less than 2 weeks away, right? 2 weeks away. And they all recognized that the president of the United States in our system is not the top. It's actually the bottom. He reports to everybody. The president works for everybody. Donald Trump believes that he is the king, that he won the United States in some competition, and it's all his to do whatever he wants to do with it. And all the rest of us have to take the consequences because, as he said, and he said this weekend with regard to Iran, but it's true with regard to everything, he said, I can do anything I want. He keeps repeating that. It's a meme in his life. I can do anything I want. And the reality is he does not understand public service. And I know that sounds really boring and like out of a civics class. But these people, as you just point out, they did. And he doesn't.
Okay, David, excellent to see you as ever. We will regroup, I hope, next Monday. And we will see what happens in the UK, whether or not they start the process for Labour leadership nominations. I think that will probably open next week. And, well, we'll see whether or not the reflecting pool is reflecting anything at all.
We will see. I look forward to, are you going to be back here in America?
I should be back by next Monday, yes, all being well. I'm going on to Paris, which is experiencing record temperatures. And I'm warned that the apartment I'm staying in with my older son has no air conditioning and it's record temperatures. So I have been warned.
You be careful. No, France, whenever it gets super hot, like people die because there's no air conditioning.
There's no air conditioning, but there is lots of bottled Evian, so I shall be taking that wherever I go.
Well, it's the best city in the world, so you should enjoy it. Have a great time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you when you get back. Safe travels.
I will see you next Monday. I always love talking to David Rothkopf. I think my favorite part of the conversation was him just talking about how Trump is the chief vandal in America. But right on YouTube, give us your comments. Tell us what you think. We love to read them. And it's good to have a place to express your feelings about the crazy that's going on right now. So if you have been, thank you very much for joining us. And a big thanks to our production team, John Romero, Ryan Murray, Rachel Passer, Heather Passaro, and Neil Rosenhaus. So the good news is we have so many B-Beast tier members now. There are too many names to read out, and we really appreciate your support.